I grew up in Mertens. We're going to see a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I've been bothered by some things during my NASA career and especially now. And I think it's especially important that I talk to you about those. I'm not going to give you any answers to life or the age of the universe. Matter of fact, I'm going to probably leave you with more questions than answers. But I have some things I want to share with you. The first is that, interestingly enough, when I set up the displays here, I had a little bit of time and I looked around and I found that this church was the Presbyterian Church in Peoria, west of town here, starting in 1855. This church saw the Confederate and Union conflict. Its people saw 2 world wars. Its people saw the Great Depression, and it's still here. That is a testament to what churches do when they have the tenacity to stick together and stick with God. And I hope when you leave here, you'll have a better understanding of just exactly what God can do, has done, and maybe will do. Anyway, let's get started. Like I said, I don't want to give you the false impression that I'm going to give you any form of knowledge that will allow you to go say, I know exactly how the world is or the universe or the stars. I don't know that. But what I'm here to tell you is neither do the scientists. And I'm going to prove that to you. So as we get started, what I want you to leave here with is just more questions, like I said, than you have answers for. And with those questions, go seek for yourself what the truth is. It's out there, but it's hard to find. This is just a little photo I got of the moon. It's hard to see, but the space station is between the Earth and the moon there. That's what the little arrow points to, that's orbiting the Earth as we speak. Okay, now let's talk about what do we know about the moon? Well, there are a lot of myths about it. Some people see the profile of Jesus when they look at the face of the moon. I do. They say there's a man in the moon. I have difficulty with that, but I can't look at the moon without seeing the profile of Jesus. I always have. The moon is often used, as we know, as a symbol of dreams, loneliness. Many, many movies have been made about it. Many songs have been sung about it because it seems to evoke some inner meaning in us that requires that we explore it. It's also been the stuff of wild tales, werewolves that come out on the full moon. We've all heard of that. Early civilization thought that the moon controlled when a woman could get pregnant. The ancient Incas actually called the moon goddess Mamaquia, which cried silver tears. They believed that lunar eclipses, not solar eclipses, but lunar eclipses were caused by some monster trying to devour the moon. So if they felt they made a great noise, that he would go away. Well, they were always successful because it always goes away. So they felt like they were really doing something. Now I want to give you the first introduction to 2 concepts. One is called the empirical data concept, which is what I use and what I designed all the equipment and everybody at NASA used. Then there's a conceptual data. To give you examples, we know because we've been to the moon and we left laser reflectors there, that the moon is 238,900 miles from the Earth. We know that the moon is moving away from the Earth at 1.5 inches per year. We know that the moon's gravity is only 1/6 of what it is here on Earth. These are facts. Using the Begat Chronicles, we can estimate that both the Earth and the moon came into existence about 4,000 years BC. Now let me explain what the Begat Chronicles are. In the Bible, it says that Adam and Eve begat Seth and Cain and Abel. So there was a lot of begatting going on in the Bible. Well, Bible scholars have taken that data and the information it provides related to how long they lived and actually backed it back out from now and have found that 4,000 years BC is about the minimum of the age of the earth. That's a fact. Now let's get some good stuff. The moon takes 27 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes, and 11 and a half seconds to complete one rotation around the earth. Now, that's a pretty precise number. The interesting thing about that, it also takes exactly the same time for the moon to complete one revolution around the earth. Therefore, we always see the same side of the moon. We never see the other side. It's been that way for thousands of years. This is not chaos. This is not creation by chance. This is something an engineer would go crazy trying to build. God built it in one day. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and 400 times closer to the earth. Therefore, if you get to see the eclipse, and I hope you do, on Monday, if you'll notice at the moment of totality, it is exactly the same diameter as the sun. The sun and the moon will exactly cover it. That's not chaos. That's not designed by circumstance. That's designed by excellence, but more excellence than I ever have, or any man. Okay, now let's talk about conceptual data. I call it subjective conjecture. It says that the universe was formed by the Big Bang.
Teacher.
I hear it all the time. It's taught in school. The universe is expanding away from the origin of the Big Bang at a huge rate. They tell us that the moon and the earth are each 4.5 billion years old. I'm going to prove that wrong in just a minute. They say that the moon was created by breaking away from the earth. That's wrong too, and we'll see. Okay, back to some empirical data. The phases of the moon, and we'll see them in a little bit, depend on the relative angles between the moon, the earth, and the sun. The moon smells like gunpowder. We know that because when the astronauts got back in the lunar module and took their spacesuits off, it smelled like a gunpowder factory in there. So that's another thing we know. The moon is 2,160 miles in diameter. The earth is 7,926 miles in diameter. In the daylight, the moon's surface is plus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. In the darkness, it's minus 279 degrees Fahrenheit. We know that. And the moon's surface contains mineable quantities of helium-3. Back when we were going to the moon, there was a strong effort to continue to go and see about mining helium-3. The thought being, and the gee whiz fact about it back then was that if you could bring 50 tons of helium-3 back, and if we had a fusion reactor, we could supply the United States needs for electricity for 100 years. That's how much energy this thing called helium-3 has. It's available on the Earth in trace quantities. It's available in mineable quantities on the moon. Now let's look at some biblical references. In the writings of Nicodemus, he was a member of the Sanhedrin, not a Christian, although he had Christian leanings. He was asked by Pilate to go out and document the crucifixion of Christ. And he did that. At the end of it, Pilate asked him to come and make his report. And this is what he said. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the land until the 9th hour. For the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent asunder in the midst. And Jesus called out in a loud voice and said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said that, he gave up the ghost. Then Pilate sent for the Jews and asked them, Did you see that which came to pass? But they said, There was an eclipse of the sun after the custom sort. So a total eclipse happened at the instant Jesus was crucified. Now, come Monday, they're going to, or we're trying to get a clear day, but it doesn't look like we're going to have one. But I want you to consider something. Even if it's cloudy, that may be a better thing than if you saw the actual eclipse. Because God's going to let you see exactly what the folks that were at Golgotha saw the day Christ was crucified. You're going to see the darkness. There will be some clouds. They may not be as dark as they were when Jesus was crucified, but you're going to see it. So this is a rare opportunity you have. You're going to see exactly what those at Golgotha saw throughout the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. As you look at it, as the sun gets occluded and it gets darker, remember all the suffering that Christ had on the cross. It continued throughout the afternoon, and at the moment of the totality, it's when Jesus spoke the words that you see up there. After that, light began to come. That light represents that the light of the promise of God was fulfilled at that moment, and now the light increases, and it will keep on increasing until we see the full light when we're in His presence in heaven. As you look at the eclipse on Monday, if it's cloudy or even if it isn't, try to keep that in mind. It's a rare opportunity for you. Here are the different phases of the moon. We have the new moon, the waxing crescent. It's not important to look at all the names, but it is important to remember a little thing that we always use to look at the moon and tell what phase it's in. First of all, the rotation of the moon is measured from the point of the new moon. In other words, when it's dark. Then, as it goes through its cycle, here's a little saying we always used. If the light's on the right, it's rising. If the light's on the left, it's leaving. So if you look at the light on the moon and you see when the light's on the right side, the moon phases are rising. If the light is on the left side, the light is leaving. It's a little thing you can use to understand, and understand in Jesus' time, they used the phases of the moon as a calendar. When they were tending their sheep, they all used the moon. They didn't have their Timexes, so they had to use something. They used the phases of the moon. A blue moon occurs when there are two full moons in the same month. That's why we have the saying, once in a blue moon, because it doesn't occur very often. A harvest moon is a moon that appears around September 28th through September 30th, and it was thought in the old days to be called a harvest moon because it allowed the farmers to stay in the field longer. Okay, a supermoon occurs when the moon, which is in an elliptical orbit around the Earth, is the closest to the Earth, and it appears larger. In some parts of the world, the moon's phases are still used as a sign when to plant and when to harvest. My granddaddy used them all the time. Given what we just looked at, the pure symmetry of the Earth, Moon, Sun relationship, the fact that we always see the same side of the moon no matter what, because it's rotating at exactly the same rate that it's orbiting the Earth. The fact that when we see the eclipse on Monday, it is exactly the size of the sun, so that at the moment of totality, it exactly covers the sun. That is not random occurrence. That is designed by intelligent creation, namely God. Well, we spoke a little bit about the conceptual data, and unfortunately, that's what's used in our schools. I want to explain what it is, and I'll explain what it is not, to help you as you go forth and counsel your children on what's fact and what is not at all fact. As a matter of fact, is counterintelligent. This conflict occurs because science, and let me distinguish what we're talking about with science. When I was at NASA, we were all scientists. But we had to be able to prove that something was factual before we did it. Not the factual that you see in dating the world and how many stars there are and how far they're away. That's not science to us. That is pure conjecture, and I'll show you why. Conceptual analysis simply means they take about creating an idea, they look around for existing data or adding some theory about what they're seeing, and they go through their literature and then they make a conclusion. For example, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, waddles like a duck, has webbed feet, it's a duck. Empirically, what we do is we take their concept, we do actual hands-on experimentation with it to verify the evidence. So what we come up with is down on the bottom, it says, well, you may be right, but just in case it's a chicken wearing a duck suit, let's do a DNA test. That's the difference right there. Very elementary, but that's the difference. Let's take an engineering problem. How long has this candle been burning? That's the same question as if you ask, how long has the world been in existence? How long has the moon been in existence? It's the same type problem. So let's look at it. In the conceptual approach, first of all, you can't touch it. You have to make all of your observations from a distance. So in this case, we decide, okay, most candles are made of beeswax. Most wicks are made of cotton. And you know what? Most candles I've seen of that diameter are 10 inches long. Okay? So they said, great, go get a candle like that. And that's what they do. They obtain the candle, they light it, but after it burns 10 seconds, they're told, blow out the candle, measure how much is burned, and tell me how much burned on that candle over there. That's how they do it. The reason is the material that they use for estimating age, there are several of them, they have what's called a half-life. The half-life, for example, in carbon-14, and we won't go into all that, is 5,726 years. The whole life of carbon-14 is about 22,000 years. Well, even I haven't been around 5,700 years, so I'm not available to make a measurement. No, neither is anybody else. So what they do is, after the candle's been burning 10 seconds, they make you blow it out. That's their data. That's what they use. So then they're told, all right, based on your data, draw me a lifeline. In other words, when it's up here, it's brand new, and down here, it's all burned out. Draw the line between the two, and when you see the 50% or the part that's equal to the amount of candle that's left there, that's how much, then you can subtract that from the original length. That's how long it's been burning. Well, they do that, and then they publish the results. In our world, what we do is we examine the candle, the problem candle, with a hands-on approach. We look at it, in this case, hey, there's a manufacturer's model number and serial number. We use that to go get a candle just like it. We light it, see how fast it burns. We record the candle length at regular intervals until it's completely burned out, and then we construct a lifeline because we've got information throughout the burning cycle. Well, if that's not bad enough, we have to repeat the test 3 times. The first time, our result is plausible. The second time, our result is probable. The third time is considered factual. In the conceptual approach, they don't even make the plausible level. Now, we won't spend any time with this, but here is the candle. It's 10 inches long. The solid line is the line where I measured it at regular intervals and actually was able to plot the available length versus the time. So my data is good. What they do, their only data point is right there. So from that, they have to draw the line. Well, in this example, at 50% of the candle burned, the error between the two is 30%. That's what we're dealing with. Over on the right is the carbon-14 decay line, as they call it. But if you see up in the top, it says there's only one actual data point. Because if you look at the time, 5,730 years, nobody's going to be around to make that measurement. So they rely on one data point to draw the curve that they're going to give you the information about age with. All right, let's take an actual example. Mount St. Helens erupted in March of 1980, 44 years ago. A test sample of the new lava rock, that is the molten lava that sprayed out of it, when it hardened, they took a piece of it and subjected it to uranium-238 dating. Now, I told you carbon-14 has a half-life of 57 years. Uranium-238 has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. And that's what they use to make their judgments with. As a result, they came back and said the rock from Mount St. Helens was 113,000 years old, when in fact it was 44 years old. There's the problem. So now let's look at another problem. What about the dinosaurs? We know they lived. We can find their bones. They're recreated and put in the museums all over the place. And they're dated, again, in the hundreds of thousands of years. So what's wrong with that? Let's look at Genesis first chapter, God says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light and said that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And it was the evening and the morning of the first day. All right? So now what do we know? Factually. Okay? Look at the phrase, the earth was without form. The definition of that, it's unremarkable. It lacks distinguishing characteristics and other things. It also says the earth was void. Well, empty due to the removal of something. That's odd. If they were just created, why is it void, meaning that it's due to the removal of something? Okay, we also know that the land and water already was on the earth when the creation described in the Bible began. And there was darkness, but not nighttime darkness everywhere. On the first day, God created and brought forth light and separated it from the darkness. Now let's jump down to verse 16. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser night to rule the light. I'm sorry, got it backwards. And the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them on the firmament of the heaven. Firmament there means like the sky, not the earth. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. And it was the evening and the morning of the fourth day. Okay? God created the sun, the moon, and the stars on the fourth day. Well, wait a minute. We just read where there was light. He said, let there be light, and there was light. So what's the problem? Is he repeating himself? Well, here's where the empirical analyst separates from the conceptualist. Because we go, and this is what we did years ago. I was a part of a NASA group that we would take problems in the Bible or confusing things and try to figure out what was being said. And this was one of our projects that we did. Well, we went back and looked at the Earth's history, and here's what we found. Facts that we know from actual geology. There's a giant impact crater in the Gulf of Mexico that's 120 miles in diameter. The impact that created that is estimated to be an asteroid 12 miles in diameter. So the release of that impact would have shot so much debris and pieces of the asteroid into the air that the cloud would have covered the Earth. And the tidal wave, tsunami, if you want to call it that resulted, could have been 500 to 5,000 feet high. So it would decimate anything on the Earth below that level. So we know that. It's there. They found it. They've measured it. If you look in the picture there, you can see the layer that's there. So what they found was, around the world, that layer exists, except where water has washed it away. Well, what water washed it away? Remember Noah's flood? You got a good clue right there. So around the world, except where Noah's flood probably washed it away, you find that iridium layer. It's the debris from the asteroid and a lot of other debris. So this debris is interesting because there are no dinosaurs found above it. This impact could have killed them all. Above it is where the majority of the coal is found in the world. What is coal? It is compressed leaves and foliage that have been put under pressure for quite some time. It turns into coal. Well, all the foliage that was on the earth at the time of that impact died. There it is in the coal seam. Possibly. Now, I'm telling you, this is what we did. Is this the truth? I don't know. But it's factual. That much I do know. This is factual. Oh, and the other thing that this comes out of this is the biblical description of creation probably the chronicle of history of man on earth and not the chronicle of the earth itself? Think about it. And think about the description of the creation of the world in Genesis. I don't mean to make fun of it, but you can almost hear God and Moses talking. And God tells Moses, Moses, I've got this old derelict called the world, and it's a mess. So I stripped it down to its basic and built it back, and here's what I did. What you hear today that's equivalent, two guys out under a shade tree. One of them tells the other one, man, I got this 57 Chevrolet, and it was a piece of junk. I had to strip it all the way down to the frame, and now I'm going to rebuild it. And here's what I'm going to do. In that instance, the two talking about the car, they don't care about how you tore the old one down to the frame. They care about what you're going to do with the new one. Put a 327 engine in it, 2 4-barrel carburetors, 4 on the floor. You get the details. That's what God did right there with Moses. He didn't give him the details of tearing the earth down to its frame. He gave him the details of what he did afterwards. That's what we've decided. Is that the truth? I don't know. But it's factual. We know that there was this asteroid. We know that it created this huge crater, 120 miles in diameter. And it's quite possible, because of the facts that the Earth shows, that it wiped out all the Earth's living creatures as well as the foliage. Okay? So God has a way of leveling the field. Can he do it again? Now we have Apophis. Apophis is an asteroid the size of 5 football fields. It will pass within 13,000 miles of the Earth, 20 times closer to the Earth than the Moon, and it will arrive on Friday the 13th of April, 2029. Friday the 13th. It's not big enough to destroy all the life on Earth, but it would kill many and make life on Earth extremely difficult for several years. Could this be God's warning for us that we better straighten our act out or he'll do it to us again? I don't know. But it's a fact that thing is there. And we know that God gives us symbols. He's done it throughout the Bible. There's all kinds of symbology and warnings that he provides to us. Well, NASA says, don't worry, it's going to miss us. What if they're wrong? Are you ready? Now that I've scared you half to death, let me tell you a little bit about me and my tour with NASA. NASA scared me to death, as you'll see. And then it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, as you'll see. As I indicated earlier, I was born in Merton, January the 18th, 1943. I'm 81 years old. Mother was a deeply religious teacher. She helped me know and accept the Lord when I was 12. I'll never forget that day. My mother and dad ran a grocery store in Mertens. I was going home from school, and to get home from school, I had to walk by the Baptist church. I can't explain it any other way except Jesus called me into that church that day and told me that he was real, that I needed to listen to my mother, and I accepted the Lord that time and was baptized when I was 12. Mother was also a stern woman. There was never any doubt that my brother and I were going to college. Well, she asked what I wanted to do. I had no idea. But I knew I was good at repairing my dad's farm equipment, so I decided to become a mechanical engineer. And that's as much depth as I went to in making the decision to become a mechanical engineer. That's the truth. So, and my granddad, when I told him, he thought it was a great idea because we need an engineer in the family to drive trains. So he was really happy about it. He's going to get to ride on a train. Well, I attended the University of Texas, and a little side note to that, throughout my NASA career, my boss was always an Aggie. And that's the truth. In my first assignment, when I went to work at NASA in 1967, I designed and tested propulsion and fluid systems for the Apollo program. I retired in 1993 as the Director of Quality Engineering at the Johnson Space Center. And throughout my career, the Lord and I have had a lot of discussions about me and my capabilities, about what he'd gotten me into, as I'll show you in a minute. And only now, I finally figured out that his leadership and guidance led me to the most rewarding job I could have ever imagined. I would have worked there for nothing at that time, looking back on it now. When I reported to NASA, I was assigned to the Engineering Directorate, Propulsion and Power Division, as a Propulsion and Fluid Power Systems RDT&E engineer. That's a mouthful. Research, development, test, and evaluation. That's what it meant. The first week I was there, I thought I would probably get some kind of orientation, and I did. My boss took me out to a test facility and said to take that rocket motor, you see the woman standing beside it, and qualify it to go to the moon. That was my first assignment, and that was my total instruction. Well, based on my vast experience fixing the rocket motors on Dad's farm, I thought I might be in a bit of trouble. So I had this talk with the Lord and asked him, why in the world did you get me into this? When I get you home, we're going to have a come to Jesus meeting. Well, considering who I was talking to, he was already there, so when I got home, that'd make two, and I probably should have kept my mouth shut to begin with. So anyway, I went home believing that I was going to have the shortest engineering career in the history of mankind. But when I got home, several things happened. I went out and met with my neighbors, and I discovered we were all scared because we were being asked to do something no one else had ever done. And there was no training. There was no guidelines. There were no handbooks. We were going to build those for those that followed us. We didn't have any. The second thing that happened I was watching some TV show, and they had a special on. At that time, the nuclear Navy was all new. And the head of the Navy's nuclear program was a guy named Admiral Hyman Rickover. He was on there, and he was describing their program, and he showed that plaque on the right. And he said he had given that plaque to President John Kennedy, and he also gave the plaque to every commander of a nuclear submarine in the fleet. I looked at that, and suddenly I knew that was the Lord's answer to me. And by the way, everybody says, the Lord doesn't talk to me. Well, yes, he does. You got to know how to listen. You got to understand what you're hearing. When you and your family get ready to go on a vacation, you go out to get in the car and leave, and you got a flat tire. Well, you can get upset about it, or you can think, maybe that's the Lord telling me and saving my life. Unfortunately, you'll never know for sure because you don't get to go. Maybe the Lord just saved your life by talking to you. That's the kind of conversation you need to be alert for, because it's there. I realized at that time that we were all in the same boat together, and that we were charged with the responsibility to go from the earth to another of God's creations and learn about it, and maybe learn a little bit about Him. So that gave me a little comfort. Then the plaque, I've used that saying for many years. And by the way, that's an old Nordish fisherman's prayer that Admiral Rickover gave to all these nuclear submarine drivers. So it means, it has many, many possible meanings. But to me, it means no matter how small your boat or how great the sea, you've got to set sail, and you've got to trust the Lord to guide you. There's another old saying, the Lord can't drive a parked car. It's not. You have to get underway. Then I also realized, just as the Lord showed his disciples in the small boat on the stormy seas, you need fear nothing if he's with you. Now, one little side note. Another thing I learned from the story of the disciples and Jesus in the boat, we're told not to worry. Disciples were sore afraid, and Jesus was in the boat with them. So it's okay to be a little fearful as long as you realize who's in the boat with you and finally let him take over. Another thing I learned, if you're going to fail, fail big. Don't go out and do it on a great sea, not in your bathtub at home. Follow the challenge that life has for you. That's what God intends for you to do. He doesn't intend for you to sit home and risk dying in your bathtub. He wants you to go out, get on the sea, and let him guide you. Life's journey is actually pretty simple. There's an old thing, it's called Occam's razor. It simply says, when all else fails, the simplest answer is probably the correct one. And that's true. So, the thing to do, set sail on your boat, choose your direction, and let's see if the Lord's going to let you hold that course or if he's going to alter it for you. Really simple. And by the way, I'm going to have that put on my tombstone because it's meant so much to me. My most notable and humbling moment at NASA was not Apollo 11 when we landed on the moon. We had practiced that so much, and simulated it so much and ran so many tests about it, when it actually happened, it was almost like an afterthought, because we knew exactly what was going to happen. There were some exciting moments, but it wasn't my most memorable moment. My most memorable time came on Apollo 8. Apollo 8 was launched on December 21st, 1968, with a goal to orbit the moon, not land on it, but to test all of the equipment that was going to be used when they did land on it. The crew was Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders. They're all gone now. At 68 hours into the mission, the Apollo spacecraft went behind the moon. The moon blocked communications with mission control, and the crew had to fire this service propulsion system that I had qualified to go to the moon, which put a little angst in my mind. That was required to put the spacecraft into orbit on the backside of the moon. We wouldn't know if the rocket motor fired until the spacecraft came from behind the moon and communications was restored. Well, the crew had placed a camera in the window of the spacecraft so we could see what they saw. At the moment communications was reestablished, as it came out from behind the moon, there's what we saw. It was an Earthrise. Nobody had prepared to see that. We knew it was going to happen, but nobody had prepared to see that sight that until that time only God had seen. It was an awe-inspiring moment. I'll never forget it. Then on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1968, the crew of Apollo 8, the first humans to travel to the moon, read from the book of Genesis during a TV broadcast. They read to you the same scripture I read earlier. Then they closed the telecast with this salutation. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth. I will never forget that, especially because it happened at Christmas time. As I indicated at the outset, I don't have any answers for you. I showed you some of the things that we looked at to gather factual information to make decisions about what we see going on in the world today and what they're telling us that seems to contradict the Bible. No, it does contradict the Bible. Well, we're at a disadvantage. The Bible is essentially excluded from the classroom. So all the factual information from the Bible can't be taught. Well, what do we do there? What you have to do is, first of all, don't be afraid to question science. If you remember COVID, boy, there's one of the biggest failures of science in the world. They rushed the testing on it, they didn't use the proper protocols, and they got an answer that was wrong, just like the dating of the Earth. COVID doesn't work very well, no matter how many booster shots you take. It's because they cut the testing down. They didn't follow the right protocols. So don't be afraid to challenge science. And you have to allow your children to give the answers that the schools expect. You have to render under Caesar that which is Caesar's. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it or allow your children to accept it. Look up the scripture in the Bible. That's your reference point. It's factual. It's there. It's tested the time, just like this old church has stood the test of time and all the elements, all the things that has gone on during this church's existence. They apply just like the Bible does. The Bible is real. When all else fails, it is the one factual document that you will find, and yet we can't teach it in school. Even the history associated with it can't be taught. So, what do? What you should take away from this discussion is 1 Corinthians 3:18 through 20. Let no man deceive himself. If any man amongst you seemeth to be wise in the world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. In other words, let him prove himself to be foolish. Maybe then he will understand he's not wise at all. For the wisdom of the world is foolishness with God. He created it. Who can say that they can even approach being able to set up the moon to where it rotates at exactly the rate that keeps the profile of Jesus in sight to us at all times? I don't know anybody that could do it. I don't know any organization that could begin to do something like that. God did it with a flick of his finger. For it is written, he taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are in fact vain. And that is the truth. And I hope that's kind of what I've shown you today. Now, I don't promise I can answer them, but any questions? Okay. Anybody?
Have you ever seen the time of this? Like we're gonna.
No, I've seen a partial, not a total.
This.
But I've seen an Earth eclipse.
See, that's.
But I know I have to say the things we did at NASA are just mind-boggling to an old farm boy from Mertens. The things that we saw and the things that we did, I would not have anticipated that as a boy at all. But the good Lord was good to me, and he let me have a job to where I wouldn't have done anything else.
Let me ask you, you said the moon gets farther away from the Earth. Little bit each year.
Yes.
What's the effect of that in terms of tides and things that happen on Earth?
The tides are getting smaller and the world's spinning faster.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Matter of fact, if you just saw it the other day and you scratched your head and said, what in the world's going on? They made the big announcement, and I hope you all follow this. You have to adjust your watches in 1 second, because the world time is in error now by 1 second. That's because it's moving away from the moon and it's spinning faster. So we have to adjust our clocks by 1 second. It won't be long, we'll have to do it again. Okay?
So repeat that again. Like you said, the Earth is moving faster, spinning faster. I think that's what I'm expecting. So
Yeah.
we're logical. The tides are blowing.
Yeah. And please don't take away from here that I said Apophis is coming that's going to wipe everybody out. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that God is sending us a message. I have every confidence in my colleagues at NASA that it will miss us, but not very far. And it's close enough that we need to get the message. And we need to stop this nonsense that's purportedly what the world says now. The world hasn't changed. The Bible hasn't changed. The facts from the Bible have not changed. We've changed, and not for the better.
Amen.
Okay, yeah.
Good question. How has NASA changed over the years?
I'm sorry?
How has NASA changed over the years?
Oh, goodness. When I was there, as I showed you in our testing, which I'm most familiar with, we had to have 3 identical results in all of our testing before we could ever move to design what we were actually testing. In addition, before we could incorporate it, it had to go before board after board after board to make sure that what we were doing played well with all the other systems that were going to be used to go to the moon. Now, I'll just give you a personal example. Recently, I was asked to go back to NASA because they were having a problem down on the Cape with a fuel leak on the Artemis, which is the next vehicle that's scheduled to go to the moon. Anyway, they had a fuel leak. We went down and found that the design of the umbilical that connects the fuel hose to the spacecraft was a bad design.
Weird.
Well, they fixed it. Then they did a tanking test, which means literally they filled it up with fuel. When they got to the point where the fuel covered this umbilical where the leak had been before, it leaked again. But rather than say, stop everything, drain the tanks, let's go back to the drawing board, they declared that a success. That would have never happened when I was there. Recently, this, I forgot what they called it now, the rocket that's built down and flown down in South Texas. It launched. About 3 minutes into the flight, it blew up. They declared it a success because they achieved all their scientific objectives. I don't think so. If it blew up, that's a pretty important objective to have. But they declared it as a successful flight. That's the difference.
No.
Okay? Anything else? I sure appreciate y'all letting me talk. I wanted to say this for a long time and to alert folks that what you're seeing about ages of the Earth and the distance to the stars, and they call it science, that's not science. It doesn't even rise to the level of conjecture in a real empirical world. It doesn't. And yet that's what they teach our children with. That's wrong. Our children are getting the wrong idea, and these facts, as they call them, conflict with the Bible. So that creates a problem in children's understanding of the Bible. That's wrong. We need to get back to the basics. And as they say, dance with those that brought us. And that's the Bible. Okay?
Like you say.